pose to the panel is, if that in fact is one of our main objectives here, to create this broad Jewish response and non-Jewish response to the problems we're facing, how does a community do that in practical terms? How do we create a safe space for people who may vigorously disagree with one another on a whole range of issues, but can come together in a unified way around this issue that we've been discussing all morning? In practical terms, how does one do that?
I don't know why you're looking at me. I'm not in the Jewish community, but I will make 2 points. First, David is clearly on the Zionist left. I am on the Zionist right. He is an appointee of President Obama. I'm an appointee of President Bush, the second, and the first, actually. We differ in lots of ways. We differ in lots of ways, but I would endorse his point about J Street as a symbol of the Zionist left. I disagree with almost every position it takes. But my view, especially as someone who comes out, I'm not sure you're clapping for my endorsement or my disagreement, but I'll take it. My position as someone who's not in the Jewish community, who is in the world of Middle East studies, is that anyone who is concerned about the security and welfare of Israel is on my side. Might want to get there in very different ways, in ways in which I'd argue strenuously, but as long as there is that Zionist core, we're on the same side. So I have a big tent approach that endorses yours. Secondly, I use the word Zionist. I like the word Zionist. Anyone can be a Zionist who's concerned about the welfare, who believes that Jews should have a homeland and concerned with that homeland and its security and welfare. I think that's a much better term than Jewish for this purpose. Judaism is a religion. And as we've heard, people like Chomsky and various professors and so forth will strut their Jewish identity as a mechanism to say, I may be Jewish, but I'm against Israel, in enhancing the power of their views. I want to take that away from them. I also simultaneously want to take away the sense of second-classhood, of auxiliaryship that non-Jews have in being pro-Israel. And so if one cannot think of this in Jewish, non-Jewish terms, and we've heard that term a number of times this morning, but in terms of Zionists, Zionist cuts across whatever your origins and identity might be and focuses on what your views are. So I like the term Zionist, anti-Zionist. These, I think, much more accurately depict the situation. And so in my view, J Street and its ilk are Zionist. I believe they are. And therefore, I think they are an important facet of this coalition.
Rachel,
I would just make a very important point with regards to young people, and not that by any means I'm the representative of the next generation, but as one of the as one of the younger people present, I think it's very important that this open tent idea exists particularly on campuses where you often find much alienation if you only present a very hard right perspective. I think that what will be the challenge, and I agree with using the word Zionism more so than Jewish, but I think what the challenge will be is that young people see Zionism equated with racism, occupier, colonial. Those are the concepts that come to their mind when they hear Zionist. We need to reclaim what Zionism is, and I think that's something that our community can work on.
What I think, in some respects, I think we've answered the question about how one creates a safe space. When you have people who identify themselves as on the right and on the left who can sit on the same podium and can say we vigorously disagree on a whole host of issues, but we're going to create a safe space to work together in response to this issue. And you may disagree with Group X or Group Y on a whole host of things, but for the purpose of this campaign to respond to the threat of delegitimization, I think having respected voices across the political spectrum, I think, is a key to communities being able to create that safe space.
We disagree on tactics. we agree on goals.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about messages. This also from the Reut Institute report. Israel has been, I would say not successfully, but there are attempts to brand Israel by its adversaries as a violent country that violates international law. We heard this morning from Erwin Kotler, and human rights, and Natan and Alan Dershowitz. With such a brand, even the most outrageous accusations may stick. A different brand would make Israel's communications more effective, and it would also make it more immune to attacks by its offenders. What should Israel's brand be? How should we be projecting Israel? And should we be projecting Israel in different ways to different audiences? Are we in a situation where it's not a one-size-fits-all in terms of our messaging and our branding? Or should we be thinking in terms of churches, the campuses, labor unions, cultural elites, in very different kinds of terms? And if so, how does one calibrate that?
Go ahead. I would make, again, 2 points. First, the Israeli state has always had an emphasis on action, on doing things, and let the fur fly, but you've done it, you've established it. That did work. It was a very successful approach. It's no longer the right approach. Now, if you take recent wars, for example, the 2006 war or the 8-9 war that Israel conducted, the key issue was not who prevails on the battlefield. The key issue on the literal military battlefield, the key issue was who prevails in the world of public opinion. And the Israeli state needs to recognize, come up to date, and note that that wars need to be conducted, or other actions need to be conducted with a mind to public relations. Op-eds and television talk shows are the key battleground now, not the literal battleground. Secondly, I would say that Israel's fundamental problem here is that it is being judged by abstract standards, that there's a perfection and Israel's not perfect. Well, obviously it's not. Its opponents are judged by almost no standards. Nobody really cares what the situation is in the Palestinian Authority or in Gaza. And somehow to change that, to bring up the standards for Israel's enemies and to bring down the standards for Israel so that they are all judged by the same standard, that I think is the goal. Right now it is untenable. Yes, Israel's imperfect, of course, but to simply focus on Israel's imperfections and to ignore the far profounder problems in all the countries surrounding it and all the countries hostile to it is grievously to misunderstand the situation.
Anyone want to? Okay. We have many hundreds of people here today. They can't all be involved in the work of leaderships within communities, the leadership that meets with members of Congress on a regular basis, et cetera. But what practical tips do you think you might have as people in a little while will be leaving this room and heading back to their homes and places where they're going from here? What kinds of practical suggestions do you have in terms of ongoing activism beyond what we're doing here today?
Well, let me take an opening crack at that. I think a lot of this is well known to all of you, and it's common sense. Every person in this room belongs to a set of overlapping networks in their lives. They're part of sports teams, they're part of library clubs and book clubs, they're part of civic associations that they're part of cultural enterprises that they are part of. In every one of those groups, there are going to be people who, in your casual conversations, you have the opportunity to help educate them in terms of Israel and the justness and rightness of Israel's cause. You're helping not just to kind of lobby a friend and then walk away from it, but when you find a sympathetic person, explain to them why it is so vital for them to take the initiative in finding like-minded people in their own churches, in their own organizations, is a crucial opportunity that we often miss. And obviously what happens in public life writing a letter to a member of the state legislature, the member of Congress, doesn't have to be long. Writing letters to a newspaper, calling into a talk show when you hear something going on. The cumulative impact of just the people in this room. If each of you, and I don't know how many are left, 800 people in this room, if each of you committed to do one a month here of some kind of public effort when it was called for, that's 1,000 different efforts that we are going to have. So there's an awful lot that could be done. Learning the issue, learning the facts, learning how to respond to some of these criticisms. Your being here today helps significantly. There are numerous resources available that your federation can help with. Just look in the packets that you were given when you go home and consider it. So I really think that there is a lot of very simple, obvious things that people can do. It is a question of having the will to take advantage of those opportunities and get it done.
I agree with everything that Rabbi Saperstein said, and I would just urge all of you, for your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren, you have to begin with education. It's got to start at home, and it has to continue. My generation and succeeding generations have no direct connection to Israel. They don't necessarily, they don't even know who Holocaust survivors are. They don't remember 67, 73. They might have a little bit of an interest in going on birthright, but they don't even know why they have that interest. But we need to encourage them. They have no sense of collective Jewish identity. It's awful. They don't know who Natan Sharansky is, who absolutely should be upheld within our community. They don't know. They don't take the time to know. And so if we don't start with our own, you can't expect this to continue. The support has to begin first with them.
I think we've been joined by a special visitor, so I'm going to bring this session to a conclusion. First, I wanted to acknowledge an organization that was helpful in bringing participants to today's conference, the Scholars for Peace in the Middle East, which is having a conference at the Conrad Miami Hotel beginning today. It's a 3-day conference. And we want to thank them for the help that they provided in bringing a number of speakers to us. I also want to remind you of what I said at the beginning. We have launched this major new initiative in the Federation movement, the JFNA's Israel Action Network. It will be working with communities across North America to design strategic and coordinated responses to the problems that we've been addressing here this morning. Miami, as I said before, has been a great supporter of this initiative. We're going to work with Miami to make sure that Miami has a plan in place to do what it needs to do to address the challenges it faces, identify its assets, and move forward on aggressively on this agenda. Again, and I want us all to thank the Miami Federation for bringing us together this morning. Just a tremendous job. And I want to thank the panel for a very insightful, provocative, and thoughtful approach to the issues that we've been addressing. Thank you very much.